Sometimes slow guitar solos over simple chord progressions seem to come across more melodically, more lyrically than other solos. And it's these solos that also can be a little bit harder to decipher, harder to tease apart, because there's a lot more going on than just the number of notes that are being played and how fast they're being played. Welcome back to the channel. My name's Chris. Today you will learn a few techniques that I use to create lyrical solos. Now, lyrical is a word that you don't hear a lot in sort of the guitar player's vernacular. We use the term melodic much more than lyrical. So I want to talk about those two things. I want to sort of tease apart those two words, the difference between melodic and lyrical. That player's very melodic versus that player's very lyrical. So I want to tease those two terms apart, and we're going to zoom in and I'm going to tear apart that solo that I opened with just to show you some of the ideas that I use, the choices that I make, not only for notes, which notes are being played, because that's a big deal, target notes, and I'll get into that in a second, but what are the other choices that are being made? Using techniques like bending, sliding, manipulating time a little bit, playing slow, playing fast, when you choose to do those things to generate a solo that has some story to it. So that's what we're going to do when we zoom in. Before we do, let's just talk about these two terms, melodic and lyrical. Anytime you play notes in sequence, you're playing a melody. So the term melodic is a little bit overbaked in this situation. But what it does really refer to is the idea of a player playing notes that specifically tie to the harmony below and in some sort of a thoughtful way. So it's those note choices that make the term melodic sort of tie together. That player's very melodic. That player's got a great sense of melody. We're really talking about target notes there. Lyrical actually has a little bit more depth to it. It suggests that there's much more thought going into the process and that there's some sort of poetic agency going on here, right? I'm really thinking about how I'm moving you through these notes and how I'm phrasing this stuff so that there's much more going on than just the note choices, but I'm using my instrument and my brain and my sort of sensibility to take you on a journey. So that's what I want to talk about. Let's zoom in. We're going to tear down that solo and I'm going to show you what those choices are and how I make them and what their impact is. Okay, playing lyrically. It's not rocket science, but it's also not just a single technique, right? This idea of crafting a solo and playing something lyrical and expressive. What you're going to be doing is pulling from multiple techniques, ideas, harmonic ideas. What's the chord progression we're playing over? What are the possible target notes? How slow is the track? Where do I want to create tension, etc. Let me just first start with showing you what the chord progression is doing here. So we're playing A to E. This is a very simple chord progression. Now we're playing D. We're headed back to A, and then we end on E. Then the whole thing starts over. So it's really 1, 5, 4, 1, 5. So that's the chord progression. So now I want to play the solo once through. I'm going to dive in here phrase by phrase and we're going to tear it apart. I'm going to show you the thought processes and the techniques and the things I'm thinking about. But I just want to play it once for you again without the backing track, just so you can watch it develop. And just look out for things. What kind of techniques am I using? Can you see me sort of hitting any target notes where you sort of can hear the chord progression change? Like I've used a note that suggests the chord progression changing. How do I throttle note values? Am I slowing down in places? When am I using a lot of notes? When am I not using a lot of notes? Here's the solo. So I would call that, an expressive solo. It's a simple chord progression. It tells sort of a story, maps to the whole neck, follows the chord progression. It's got a lot of good elements into it. Regardless of how good the solo is, that's not important. What's important here is that we're using the solo as an example to tear apart and start looking at the ideas about how I go about creating something that's memorable and that's expressive and lyrical. Okay, so here we go. The first riff, the first phrase is this. Now, this is a simple arpeggio. So I'm just playing up an A major arpeggio. And there's a bit of counterpoint here where I rock back and forth. Watch this. And then I'm bending this note up. But I'm not just bending the note. I'm seeing the note I'm bending to as this. So when I'm here, I'm looking here. I'm listening for this note. That's my target note. But I'm playing down a whole step below it and bending up. That's a target note. I'm definitely looking to get this sound over the A. But I'm going to do it with a bend. Right? Now the song goes from A to E. And so here's the phrase I play to connect the A and the E chord together. So it starts out with this tapping idea. It goes to this dyad, right? This like stacked thirds. And it ends on this E chord. So let me tear that apart for you a little bit. This riff right here, this tapping thing, sounds like, well, that's a trick, right? That's like some flair. It's a tricky sort of Eddie Van Halen type of thing. And it is. But listen to these notes. It's just an A major triad, right? That's all I'm playing. But this tapping allows me to put some real expression to it. So I'm bending up, right? I'm hitting this note here on the 7th fret, and I'm using my ring finger back here to help me push it up a whole step because the note I want is here. Now I'm already bent up to the 3rd. And there's the root. So that's 5, root, 3. Really cool, right? And then I resolve to this dyad over the E chord. And I'm just seeing this triad. It's just an E chord, right? These are my E triads right here. All E chords. And I'm just playing the 2 bottom notes. Because the top note, in this case, is the root. The bass player is playing the root. The rhythm guitar is playing the full chord, so I don't really need the root. Then I just walk down in diatonic thirds to this E. And that's just right inside the E chord. Right? Pretty simple. Now we're moving to the D chord in the progression. And the phrase I play here is this. So that looks also sort of like a tricky little lick, but listen, all I'm doing is this. I'm just climbing up the A major scale from the 7. And this note, right, this is my target note for the D. But playing it this way allows me some expression. And what I'm doing here is sliding from the 1st note to the 2nd note, sliding from the 3rd note to the 4th note, and letting them both ring, and then bending to that last note. And listen, they're both ringing out, and that happens to be my D major chord. The next phrase takes me from the D to the A and to the E. And that simply goes like this. So we start on the D, bending up into that target note again, ending on this A, and ending on this E. So the target notes here are for the D, the root for the A, and the 3rd for the E. Right? all target notes. The way I'm getting there, I'm bending up into that note for the D, and then I'm using what I would call this sort of Chris Buckian trill thing, right? And the way you do that is I'm bent up here, but as I release, I slide into the note and then slide back down without picking. So slow motion, it looks like this. And then pull off to this note. And down to the A. So this is just a simple scale tone, right? I'm just going up the scale here. But when I play this, I'm using all slides, and I'm purposely playing slow behind the beat. Just to really get some expression out of there, right? Okay, so that completes the first half of the solo. The second half of the solo, as you may have noticed, starts up an octave, and all I do is play the exact same thing I've played at the beginning. Same exact thing, but I'm taking it up an octave. Really interesting little simple trick. I'm just going to repeat the same thing, take it up an octave. It does two things. One is it's memorable. You've heard this before. So when I take it up an octave, even though it's fresh, because all of the notes are up an octave, right? I've increased the dynamic range here. It's familiar. You've already heard it. So it's safe for me. And that gets me back to the A chord, right? Now the next phrase goes from the A to the E. And that sounds like this. Now there's a lot going on here. I've purposely chose to create an enormous amount of harmonic tension here that I can resolve going from the A chord to the E chord. And that tension is built by playing two notes at the same time that are a half step apart. This note here, the one I'm bending to, and this one are a half step apart. And then I use this nice little intervallic idea to get myself to the root of the E. So when the phrase starts, there's this much harmonic tension. And when it ends there. That's what I'm looking for. Creating all that tension and then depositing it, right? Relieving it all on that root for the E chord. Resolving to that E, I just want to show you this interval idea. I'm not really using a scale here. I'm going like this. This is like an intervallic hop, right? I'm not playing up a scale. It's not an arpeggio. I'm using the notes from the scale and I'm just hopping across intervals, and I'll show you how I do that. From this A note here on the B string, I'm just going down, and these are all notes from the A major scale. I'm just going from the A note here, down a minor third, up a fourth, down an octave, and up a fourth. So instead of this, you've got a little more sort of swing to it, right? And those intervals give the melody right there some real distance, some real hopping to do, which is interesting. I haven't done that kind of thing before, and I'm ending on this E note, and so that interval just helps that intervallic design just helps me sort of like do something interesting there. Okay, now I'm on the E, and we're headed to the D chord. And my target is here. I see this D triad right here. I've been playing up here in this part of the solo, and there's a D triad right here, so I'm going to leverage this. I'm here right now on the E, and I'm headed to this D triad. And the phrase I played goes like this. See, I end on this E triad here. I've also got an open E ringing out, which is the 9, so this is like a D add 9 with that E string ringing out. But notice how I get here. And listen to this. So really the phrase is this, right? Just up the scale, and then down the triad. Up the scale, down the triad. But as I'm going up here, what I notice here is that these two notes are a half step apart. Again. So I'm saying to myself, can I get away with playing those at the same time just to create some tension? Right? It's just a really interesting way to just play up the scale and down the triad. Right? I'm throwing that 9 in there, that high E string, just to add some flavor. Listen to that. It's like a really beautiful little add to just the triad. Okay, the second half of that D chord, in other words, the D is for 2 measures. So the second half, I've been playing slowly, I've been playing very restrained. I'm coming up to the end of the solo, and what I want right now is to step on the gas. I want something surprising, I want to surprise the audience, and I want to make it something interesting. So I play this phrase. Now this is simply a D major 7 arpeggio. It's not really that difficult. It's just these 4 notes. And against D, that's 7, root, 3, 5. So I play that once, go up an octave, play it again, go up an octave, play it again, and descend a D major chord. So the whole phrase looks like this. And then I end on this note, which is E, and the chord changes to A. So you get this. I'm playing the 5th, which is E, over the A chord. And I did that on purpose because that 5 over the 1 is a very regal sounding resolution. And so listen to the way it sounds over this run. It's just so resolved and home and very regal sounding, and that's what I was looking for. Okay, so the last lick is simply this sort of what I would call like an A major pentatonic blues run. Now there's some sliding around here. It's sort of a very sort of Larry Carlton would do something like this. And that note, those notes are simply this. This is, I'm looking at the A major pentatonic scale. But I'm sliding into each one. I'm sliding down there. And then this very last phrase is a slight bend, just hinting at a minor pentatonic for a moment. Ending on that root. So again, creating a little tension and ending on that A note. Really to sort of seal it all off with a really beautiful resolve. I'm ending on A over A. It doesn't get any more resolved than that. But you can see I've had a journey with lots of interesting things going on, using a lot of techniques, bringing a lot of things that I know how to do to bear on solving this problem about telling an interesting story, and using my knowledge of what the harmony is, where can I get away with a lot of musical tension, and can I, as a musician, create that tension and resolve it when the next chord comes around? Like, those are the types of things I'm thinking about. Okay, so there it is. Some ideas about how to play a little bit more lyrically. And again, the difference between melodic and lyric. Melodic doesn't really cover what I'm talking about here. These slower solos that are much more expressive, they take some energy and some thoughtfulness, right? You're not just blasting through scales. And we're not certainly just saying, well, I'm just going to play triads and just hit all the target notes and I should be good, right? But we're really using all the tools. We're bringing all the tools we know how to use to bear. We're bending, we're sliding, we're waiting for notes, we're creating a lot of tension, we're choosing a very dissonant moment in order to be able to resolve it. So there's a lot going on there. All right, I've tabbed this example out. The tabs are over on Patreon. I've linked that in the description below. Head on over there if you'd like to get the tabs, and if you'd like to support the channel, Patreon's the best way to do it, and if you do decide to support the channel, I appreciate that, and I thank you in advance. Okay, just start playing lyrically. Whatever capability you have for bending, sliding, whatever it is, you can start playing more lyrically if you just slow down and think about it a little bit more. These techniques are not rocket science. We're not talking about anything that is beyond the scope of anybody's capability. Okay, I hope you enjoy this. I hope it helps, and I'll see you next time.